Now, I'm really excited to introduce our speaker. Betsy Morgan is the co-founder of Magnet Companies, which is a private equity-backed company focusing on media and commerce. She's also an associate professor at Columbia Business School and Columbia College. Prior to founding Magnet, Ms. Morgan served as an executive in residence of LionTree, which is an advisory and merchant bank firm specializing in technology and media. Ms. Morgan has also served as the CEO of The Blaze, an early multi-platform and direct-to-consumer news and entertainment company. And she was also the first CEO of the Huffington Post. Ms. Morgan has an MBA from Harvard Business School and a BA in political science and economics from Colby College, where she's also served as a member of the Board of Trustees for 8 years. Betsy is going to be joining conversation with our own amazing Lauren Haggerty, who is our Director of Marketing and Community with Power to Five. Take it away, ladies.
Thanks, Meg, and thank you so much, Betsy, for being here. Your past experience speaks for itself, and I really can't wait to dive in and learn more about you and what you're creating now, and really, the theme of the summit, how this tech is, we're making it for good. So thank you for being here. I really appreciate it.
Thanks, Lauren, for having me.
So let's kind of dive in and start from the top. I'd love for you to tell us a little more about yourself, where you're based, and give us a little insight into your career journey.
Sure. So Lauren, I'm based on the East Coast, on the foggy East Coast this morning or this afternoon. And my career is really sort of a career in 3 chapters so far. Which encompass both the macro and the micro. And I can talk a little bit about that. I think it's actually sort of an interesting lens with which to look at your professional life. So my 3 chapters are, I worked in traditional media in broadcast television for about 10 years. That was macro, like big media. I ran 2 digital native startups, the Huffington Post and the Blaze, on different ends of the ideological spectrum, which was super interesting. That's very much the micro, being an operator, a CEO of 2 small, but then got big startups. And now I feel like I'm a little bit back to the macro. I'd say my time at LionTree was a little bit of, the transition from micro back to macro. And my macro, well, maybe it's a little bit macro and micro. I have 2 business partners on the West Coast, and we have private equity backing, and we have invested in 3 startups, 2 of which we're building from scratch, and 1 is an investment of an existing company. So I guess that is startup-y. So maybe that's a little bit micro, and maybe my transition from the Blaze to investment banking was a little bit back on the macro to kind of see the big picture of consumer.
It's incredible. And I'm excited to dive into a little bit more about your work at Magnet Companies, and you're a founder of this incredible organization. So talk to me a little bit more about what y'all do there. I know you just said you invest in startups, but what does that look like? And why was that so important for you to start this new venture?
So we have, so the 3 of us, so 3 founding partners, we have private equity money behind us, very deliberately not VC money. We wanted to kind of go a little bit further on the capital food chain to private equity money. We have our first company, our first investment is a podcasting business called Dear Media that has about 50 podcasts under its belt. And its flagship podcast is called The Skinny Confidential. Maybe some of the watchers and listeners have heard of The Skinny Confidential and some of our other podcasts. Our second investment is an eyelash company that we started with Jenna Lyons, who was the former creative director of J. Crew. And Jenna wanted to build a better lash. And so we are selling 15 to 20 lashes and a fantastic application tool. And the brand is called Love Scene. And we launched that last September. And then the third business, which launched in March, is called Together. And the last E in Together is an X. And it's a women and culture and sport business that we started with 4 Olympic athletes. including Alex Morgan, the soccer player. And that's just looking for opportunities to tell stories and build a brand around women's sport. And Lauren, I'd say, what do these kind of three funky businesses all have in common? They are all very much women-led and for women. And they were all opportunities in the marketplace which we felt like weren't being addressed or under-addressed. So we liked the spaces because we just didn't feel like enough people were in them. And we wanted to make those categories better, more interesting, more fun. And here we are.
Fantastic. I'm a huge Skinny Confidential fan. So selfishly, I'm excited to dive in and learn more about Dear Media, which we'll get to in just a bit. But something that I really loved was this quote that you mentioned: chaos is an opportunity. And there's a certain amount of chaos in the media industry today. Can you enlighten us a little more on that statement?
So I feel like at the very beginning of the pandemic, we all needed something to sort of hang on to, right? Because nobody knew what what became 18, 19, 20 months was going to look like. And that was sort of me, the power of positive thinking, thought, okay, in this chaos, in this craziness, we don't know what's going to happen, in the next week, in the next month, in the next season. We're going to use the opportunity of chaos to start things and build things. Before the pandemic, we had just invested in Dear Media, so we had made that investment. We had not started Love Scene. We had not started Together. And we were going to use the lockdown to start to grow one fabulous business in the audio space and launch two other businesses. And I think if you look back to what's happening in media in general, that's also kind of chaotic. And one of the things that was important to me and to my two founders at the start was that we wanted sort of to embrace the chaos of media and changing media. We wanted to expand the narrative to something that was much broader, that was more consumer oriented. So we didn't want to just make content, which is what the three of us did mostly in our past jobs. And we wanted to sell things. So we wanted to be in the commerce business. And I'd say that certainly my two gigs at the Huffington Post, at the Blaze, one of my business partners ran Awesomeness TV. Another worked for the Kardashian sisters. So we all sort of knew something about kind of our third C, content, commerce, the third C being community. We knew something about the power of community and the power of audiences. And so we were going to embrace the, I guess, fourth C, chaos, and start to build interesting communities. And that's what, we're embarking on doing.
And that really nicely leads into this next question, which is, what is your methodology for finding that sweet spot? So you just mentioned, why each one of those are important, but how does that all kind of come together to, be this investable opportunity for y'all?
Right. So when the three of us got together 4+ years ago, we had all sorts of ideas about where there was interesting openings and kind of white space in the media and consumer space. And we went sort of rushing into a bunch of different categories that we ended up liking less than we thought we would. So kind of thesis didn't hold. The three of us are all sort of well-networked people and kind of old enough in our experience that there were a lot of interesting things that came to us. And we kind of realized, sort of back to embrace the chaos, we were just going to kind of take every meeting and look at every category and just kind of road test it on the fly and figured out what resonated with us. And so our story of how we partnered with Alex Morgan and Together is an interesting one. Alex was really interested in building a media business. She found us through some mutual friends in the media space. We had a really, really interesting meeting with her in LA 2 summers ago. And she said, I have this thing that I kind of want to build. And I feel like female athletes have so much more potential to tell their stories kind of across the board, every sport you can think of. And I think we need to have a stronger voice, and we shouldn't be like an also ran to men's sports. And so we spent half a day with Alex and thought, oh, this is great. We weren't necessarily looking in the category. We liked sports. we were like, this is great. She's fantastic. Like, how do we figure this out? How do we build this? And so that's how, it took then another year to sort of put together to get a team to bring on 3 other founding athletes along with Alex. And that's kind of how it happened. I think it's important in your professional life to sort of have a theme and a thesis and something you're going to go after. But kind of back to the micro and the macro, I think you also have to be willing to sort of throw it up and say, maybe I'll do something else. Maybe it's not going to work. And so it feels like all the initial categories that we were sort of interested in 4 years ago, like I don't even remember what half of them are, right? We wanted to do, actually early on, we wanted to do something in the direct shopping space. We thought, there's got to be better digital competitors to the juggernaut that is QVC or HSN. And we went hard and fast into that space. But didn't find anything we wanted to buy, didn't necessarily find anything we want to build. We still like the category, but there just wasn't a fit. So, sort of after 6 months of trying, we were like, okay, move on to the next thing. So that idea of sort of embracing a theme, a thesis, but also being really open-minded as to what comes to you, when opportunity knocks at your door, like you just answer the door and then you never know what's going to happen.
What a great phrase and way to kind of explain this. And it makes me think a lot of, the saying that's like, do you make decisions with your head or your heart? Which, kind of brings us into this next question too. And you talked a little bit about this, wanting to invest in female-led startups and of course, organizations that are going to make a good social impact. But how do you evaluate, at the end of the day, how do you choose one over another? Which consumer-oriented entities to inquire, invest, start? Is there one thing that really, y'all all are in agreement on that this is, the factor that we move forward with, or how does that process work?
So part of it is who your partners are, right? So in Love Scene, in our eyelash business, our partner is Jenna Lyons. We love, she's been a fantastic partner, a great creative visionary. In Together, it's 4 founding athletes. And at Dear Media, it's Michael and Lauren, who are the voices and the faces of the Skinny Confidential, who have built out 50 other podcasts. I think what's been really, Lauren, really interesting about this journey that Magnet's been on over the past 4 years is building teams at all those companies, right? So the teams that we're building are highly diverse, much younger than the 3 of us by a long shot, like by 2 generations at least, and really finding passionate people to hire to lead and run these organizations. And the 3 of us, myself and my 2 business partners as founders, we just stay out of the way. Like I often say, we're just there to make sure you don't burn the house down. But like, other than that, a lot more about social awareness, know a lot more about social marketing, a lot more about what the consumer wants than we do as these kind of 3 old folks overseeing these businesses. So we've really, I think if you talk to any of the teams that work at those 3 businesses, they would say that, Magnet has just kind of let them run the shop and let them execute on a vision for these 3 businesses. And also, Lauren, I feel like that's something that myself and my business partners have done at other companies. I mean, that's certainly like the real secret to success of early Huffington Post. And when I stepped in as CEO, the first CEO of HuffPost, the real difference was there were 30 extraordinary young people at the company at the time, and they were just doing the best of things. And so I was there a little bit as a grown-up to organize everybody a little bit, put some KPIs in place, be a grown-up if there needed to be a grown-up, and like make sure everybody had like 3 meals a day, and really nothing else. That group of 30 was so extraordinary, so assembled before I showed up 18 months into the company's founding. And that group just needed space to run and do amazing things.
I feel like it really boils down to trust. Just hearing you, talk about it and the support that you're providing this team, it's really remarkable what you've done and the space that you've given these creatives to do their best work, like you said, what they're really good at. So that's amazing.
I think, Lauren, I think trust is a big factor, and also like just not being afraid of failing, right? I've been really successful, and I guess I can kind of look back and say maybe I wasn't so overt about trying this, but there's like something in the back of my head that said, always pick the underdog, always pick the, who wants to go work for the sure thing, work for something that, that people think is the underdog or people aren't so sure will be successful. HuffPost was certainly that at the beginning. And part of that is then, you're going to fail up a storm and nobody's going to notice, and it's going to be fine because people have very low expectations for you in the first place. And maybe that's how sort of trust came into the equation, which was just like trust and try things. And it feels like one of the real hallmarks of the digital age that we all live in now is exactly that, is bringing teams together that trust their instinct, that are willing to try things, that are willing to go out on a limb, that are not going to be punished for failure, that will be rewarded for failure, that will learn from failure. And then you just kind of iterate as you go along. I think, Lauren, the other thing that's been super, super important in the businesses that I've been a part of is, and it goes to trust a little bit too, is to trust your audience, and that you can kind of start. I mean, Together is a great example. We're only a few months into this business, and we had kind of an idea who our audience was going to be. It's turned out a little bit different, but to sort of trust that audience to kind of tell you what to do next. So a great example would be with Together. We put out a handful of series on YouTube, one in the surfing space, one in the female boxing space. And the only reason they sort of went out into the world when Together launched is we just wanted to have content for people to look at. But we were sort of like, well, the audience is going to say, like, we love this like female boxing, or like, we hate this surf category. We were just going to respond to the audience. So that ability in whatever company you work for to really be like responsive in real time to what your customer and what your audience wants is a huge, huge important driver of success.
Brings up another really great point, and I'm seeing some questions coming in from our audience. And anyone else, if you have questions, feel free to submit them for Betsy. I'm watching the clock tick feverishly down here on our time, but I can assume one of the challenges in a holding company structure is making sure that what you are putting out there is different or different enough. And I'm assuming that really ties into what you were just saying about listening to your audience and taking that feedback and iterating as you see fit. But how do you ensure that the brands that are a part of Magnet Company are diverse, are different than what else is out there?
Yep, and the female sports space is a great example. So one could say, we want to be the only, one strategy is like, we want to be the only brand in the women's sports space, and we want to have that whole space to ourselves, and we'll squash any competitor that kind of comes along. We took very much a different approach, which was like, this is a space that is hugely underrepresented. There needs to be lots of competitors in the marketplace for this space to get more attention. And we're gonna do everything we can we're gonna do everything we can to support our competition. So, I'm a big believer that, there's room for many, many voices. That was certainly true at the Huffington Post. We had a lot of competitors early on that brand, our brand ended up going a lot wider, but, very sort of niche-y in politics at the beginning. There were a lot of other brands out there. And we wanted to celebrate and be supportive of everybody in the space, because we thought, like, collectively we could take on big media. And the same is true in the eyelash business. You can go to Walgreens or Dwayne Reed and look at a lot of eyelashes on the wall, and that's great. And they're all different, and they're different sizes, and they're different shapes, and they're constructed differently. And we want to celebrate everybody that's out there and say that, look, there's a group of women where we make a lash that is totally just for those women, that satisfies their beauty needs. And it's okay that there's a lot of competition in the marketplace, because it makes the category better and bigger and stronger.
That's so important. And I have a community background, so I love kind of hearing those specific anecdotes of, listening to your community, understanding what they really want and need, and, adapting yourself and your product to that. I think that's incredible. And I see a question from the chat, and Paloma would like to know, do you have any advice for hiring a team when you're building a startup and can't maybe offer the competitive salary of your competitor?
So it's hard, right? And I think in a strong marketplace, you're always going to be challenged, especially if you have limited funds. You're always going to be challenged with somebody else saying, I'll pay more, right? We've really been successful in our three businesses, not as being the highest salaried organization, but just being the organization that was the most fun to work with, right? That, I think we all spend most of our day, and probably in the pandemic, like even more of our day, working, interacting with work, interacting with our colleagues, and having a fun, supportive, interesting environment to work in is hugely important. And I do think that maybe you can't match dollar for dollar, or you totally can't match dollar for dollar, but you can match another opportunity with a really collaborative, interesting, learning work environment. It's funny, I think one of the reasons that there are more than a handful of people that have stayed at places like Google or Facebook, kind of past their prime, or more years than maybe they should have, is, people say, and I have friends that, were early in both of those companies, they say they've stayed not because the money was the best or the equity, appreciated the most, but just because they were around other talented people and they loved their colleagues, and, they really felt intellectually like it was a group of peers, and they were frightened that they couldn't get that at another company. Now, that may be true or not true. But it is, the environment that you work in is hugely important. And I certainly think, again, coming out of the pandemic now more than ever, and, maybe you don't want to hire the person that's just looking for the highest salary or the highest kind of short-term dollars. You're looking for the person that's really super curious and wants to build something.
Absolutely. Thank you for submitting the question. You have a few more minutes left. If anyone else in the audience wants to ask a question of Betsy, now is your time. But I do have a few more on my list, and this one I think is particularly interesting, and it has to do with your passion for teaching. So another accolade on your resume is teaching entrepreneurship at Columbia Business School, which is amazing. Why? What fuels this passion for teaching, developing? It sounds like you were a really encouraging manager, like at the Huffington Post. But what has driven that, love for helping career management?
So, Lauren, I think it's as simple as, like, people ask and you say yes, right? Because you never know if you're not going to get asked again. So years ago, I was asked, do you want to be an associate professor at Columbia Business School and come in and help us teach some entrepreneurship classes? And I said yes, right? Because you should just say yes. Like, what an honor to be asked, even though, I didn't have the time. And nor was it like the time I thought in my career to do that, but you just say yes. I have to say that over the years, the best class that I've taught has been a class in the college to undergrads. And so I teach an entrepreneurship class in the fall to, I think last fall we had 65 undergrads, Columbia undergrads, like from all around the country. And I got more out of the class I think the class was great and I think everyone had a great time, but I feel like I got more out of the class than the students, because you have this environment. We had, 3 hours a week where you could talk to this amazing, like, dream set of young people and ask them, what social apps do you use and not use? What's your favorite way of ordering food? What's your favorite way of communicating? Where do you buy things? What brands do you believe in? What brands do you not believe in? It was this, like, just fantastic focus group of, what's going on in the internet right now. And also like what people are studying and why they were studying them and why they needed to have a computer science degree or not, or why they wanted to be an engineer or not be an engineer, what kind of businesses they wanted to start, both consumer facing and also business facing. Like, it was just such an it's always such an unbelievably rewarding experience. So glad to do it. Like, I just can't believe I get paid to be with these, to be with a group of students like every Friday for 3 hours. It's amazing.
Sounds incredible. It's making me want to go back and take your class.
Okay. So fun. They should, these schools, all of these liberal arts schools should offer more classes like this. I feel like all the students say, gosh, if there were, 2 or 3 more classes on entrepreneurship, we'd take them in a heartbeat. Just that curiosity of like, how do you build a business, and who's the first person you hire, and how do you raise money, and how does it all work, and how did a place like Uber get started and then get so big and scale? I mean, it's super, super, super interesting and fascinating. And they're questions that that Lauren, like your generation and generations younger than you, they like, they want to know. Like, it's not I think, the idea of my generation where you sort of went into investment banking or management consulting coming out of college or business school, it feels like those days are over.
Sounds like an opportunity for another magnet company.
Right?
So I'm watching the clock again. We have 2 minutes. So last question, how can we connect with you? How can we follow you? How can we hear more about the companies you're investing in and the incredible work that you're doing as an individual? How can we follow you?
So Lauren, you can follow me on Twitter at BL Morgan. My email, I'm happy to give it, is betsy@magnetcompanies.com. You can find me on LinkedIn. I am happy to be connected to any and all of you, and I'm super, super appreciative of the time today to talk to everybody at this summit. Day 3. You guys have been sort of at it since Monday. Very impressive.
Well, we are honored to have you, and this was such a pleasure and honor to hear from you and learn about your experiences, Betsy. So thank you for being here, for taking time out of your schedule, and I hope everyone connects with Betsy and enjoys the rest of the summit.
Awesome. Thanks, Lauren. Bye, everybody.
Bye.
Thank you both. That was a really, really great chat. And it was very, very interesting. And I agree with Lauren. I would love to take your class too. So that's so awesome.